This time in the Magic Kitchen, we're talking about queer rights in the witchcraft community with Enfys J Book.
I'm Leandra Witchwood.
And I'm Elyse Wells.
And welcome to the Magic Kitchen podcast, where we talk about magic, kitchen witchcraft, herbs,
and everything in between.
The Magic Kitchen podcast is funded and supported by thewitchwoodteahouse.com, offering a variety of hand-blended loose leaf teas as well as loose herbs for all of your ritual, spell work, wellness, and everyday enjoyment needs. If you would like to support this podcast while sipping a great cup of tea, head over to thewitchwoodteahouse.com and find the magic that's in store for you.
Enfys J Book is the author of the Gold Cover Award-winning Queer Qabalah and co-author of Sagittarius Witch. They have taught workshops around the world, and they host a podcast called 4 Quick Cues, Book Talk with Enfys. Visit them at majorarqueerna.com, and we'll put that link in the show notes. Thank you for being here, Enfys.
Yeah, welcome.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Happy to be in a kitchen anytime. It's one of my favorite places to be.
Yeah, it's a good place to be.
It is. It really is.
And today we're mostly here, I guess, in a way, to talk about queer rights, a magical grimoire to honor your milestones with pride, which is your latest book. But also what I would love this conversation to be is a conversation on what the queer community needs most from the witchcraft community. How can witches in general be a better ally, create better spaces, but also how can queer folks move about in the community? You know, like what are the things that maybe are most needed by the queer community.
Yeah, gosh. No pressure to speak on behalf of the entire queer community.
Yeah, right? Like,
especially in these times. Holy crap.
Oh, man.
Oh, well, I guess I'll focus on my area of expertise, really, which is how this book sort of came about, Queer Rights, which is sort of a play on words. It's rights, R-I-T-E-S, but also R-I-G-H-T-S. But I am non-binary, bisexual, like all the things. And when I decided to change my name to better align with my own gender identity and expression, I found that I needed to do something magical about it, but I had no idea where to start. And I think that's not an uncommon experience among queer people going through milestones is we live without a script. We don't see a lot culturally about this is how you do X or this is how you commemorate this thing that you're going through. Like when you come out, do you have a party? You should, I think. What do you do? How do you celebrate chosen family? How do you prepare yourself for going to your first political action or your first queer space or event? We go through all these kind of big things that are unique to our community and to the queer journey through this culture, but we don't necessarily enter into them with the intentionality and sacredness that we could. And I think it can only benefit one's experience to come into those big moments with a sense of the profundity of them and with a sacred container and a certain amount of empowerment and personal empowerment about it. So that's what led to me creating this book is I wanted to offer a bit of a roadmap for folks who are craving some sort of sacred container for the experiences they're having within the queer community and within their own personal queer journey.
Actually, that's a quote I loved. So the foreword to Queer Rights is by Ariana Serpentine, who wrote Sacred Gender, which is a really fantastic book for those listening about the non-binary experience in witchcraft. And
it's so good. Yeah. Non-binary and trans sacredness. It's such a good book.
I loved in the foreword for your book, they said these moments of our lives, like, these rites of passage you were describing, are meant to be treasured and marked as progress, but they are marred by a culture that dehumanizes us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what really gave me goosebumps again to read it now. That's what really struck me about the deep need for this book is like, I told Leandra before we started recording, I was like, this is going to be a really personal episode for me because I don't ever really share this part of myself, but I'm bi/pan, and I'm coming to terms with realizing that I'm demisexual, which I never knew was even a thing. For those who don't know, it's that you have to know someone to be attracted to them, like as a gist. If I'm correct, like literally correct me because I'm very new on these experiences. Well, I've been realizing it's like so much even deeper than that. Like this is so silly. So I've been watching Bob's Burgers like my whole life, and Fish Odor has an eye patch, and I seriously did not notice. Like I have this weird, like I can't see people's quote unquote flaws. Like I see them for who they are, and if I don't know them yet, I feel like I can't see them at all. Like I can't describe them even. Like I'm like, I don't know. I think they were my height. Like that's kind of, it's very interesting. And then on top of that, like in witchcraft, and this is where I'm realizing how much this is all very much coming together. When I work with energies, I've recognized, and I love Ariana's last name is Serpentine. I've recognized that what patriarchy has defined as gender roles is really just a complete perversion and a misunderstanding of energy flowing. Like this is emerging thoughts. These are things I'm still working myself through, but I'm recognizing that we're in such a time of tumultuousness, like we can't even use the word trans, applying it to like portation, like people are so triggered. And I think the reason the collective is so triggered is because there's a deep truth there in a more pure, I hate the word pure because it has its like creepy intentions behind it sometimes, but like a wholeness, like a perfection, like I don't know, there's something more
like a platonic ideal kind of thing.
Maybe, yeah, like there's something at the core of what energy is. Like when we're talking about energy, what are we talking about? There's a million things we could conceptualize it as. Like I think there's something triggering in the wider masses about queer people because we've kind of pushed past that veil, and it's intimidating to people who are afraid to do that. Are you with me? Is any of this making sense?
In an obscure way a little bit. Yeah, it makes sense, I think. I think part of it is because our culture is so suppressed. We suppress so much of our individuality, so much of our authenticity that we crave it. We strive for it, but at the same time we're shamed for it. We can't fully step into that because there's a roadblock. There's a huge a collective shadow that just we smack into every single time.
Yeah. And definitely something people are struggling with even more right now in the current, well, as we're recording this,
yes,
maybe it'll change by the time this airs, but the current political environment is very threatened by people being happy and authentic in their own in their own selves and their own uniqueness. That is one of the most rebellious acts you can make is to be comfortable with who you are and all your weirdness and all your darkness and all your, strangeness and everything else.
Yeah. And self-care, it falls into that. Self-care to me is such an act of rebellion because we're told, be this way, look this way, act this way, wear these clothes, use this makeup, dye your hair, cut your hair this way, like fit into this mold here. This is the mold. But we can't. And that's one of the part of the conversation that Elyse and I were having before. Yes, was it yesterday or the day before? But we were talking about how the queer experience, how the human experience, how the witchy experience is very individual. It doesn't fit into a nice, neat little package that you can put a bow on and say, this is what it is.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually one of the things with the book that I was very intentional about is that almost every single ritual in the book can be done by yourself. The notable exceptions are ones that are specifically community related, and most of the individual ones have adaptations to do them with a group, but the default is doing it by yourself. And the reason for that is because the queer experience, when it like the beginning of that journey, is very highly individualized. And there are also, you need to give yourself space to feel the feelings without being self-conscious. And I think no matter how chill your magical working group is, I don't know, maybe it's because I was raised in the Midwest, which has a whole lot of like stoicism sort of thing, but crying in front of people is very uncomfortable for me specifically. And I know I'm not alone in that. And I want to make sure nobody is undermining their transformative experience by worrying like, oh, am I taking too long in this path working? Oh, am I, too emotional right now? Am I making people uncomfortable? You have to be able to create that container for yourself and your own journey and be comfortable in that, and then start bringing people in.
It's funny you say that, because when you were sharing before about like the most radical thing we can do is be ourselves, really.
Right.
I think that's also something like in this, like talking about having a party for coming out. My thing is always like, oh, I wouldn't want to be a fuss. And it's like, wait. Maybe that taking up that space and asking your people to show up for you is an act. It's a little out of our comfort zone, but it's a good one for us to try.
Right. And that is one of the things, circling back to kind of your original question about how can the pagan community show up and the witchcraft community show up for queer people. I think being conscious of the need for that kind of affirmation and that inclusion is really powerful right now. One of the rituals in the book that is a group ritual is basically, it's a specific coming out ritual for someone who has recently come to a new understanding of their gender identity, whether it's, I am a woman, I'm a man, I'm non-binary. And it's one meant to be celebrated with people with that same gender identity. So having a group of women welcome in a new trans woman, I think just feel that gives me tingles just thinking about like how powerful that could be, because one of the things about the trans experience is that you feel cut off from both the gender you were raised at birth and the gender you identify as when you're not welcomed in by other people of that gender.
And when you said that, like celebrating that, it felt nourishing. Like the words to me feel nourishing. Like we can nourish each other in these rites of passage. And I think in my experience, rites of passage in our culture, like there's only a couple that are really celebrated, like births and marriages.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really go through rites of passage anymore. When I was growing up, like the Sweet 16 was one of them, but it seems like that's kind of tapered off too. Like the rites of passage that mark significant transitions and just points in our life that are meaningful seem to kind of just get pushed under the rug because we don't want to be their fuss. We don't want to be bothered. We don't want to bother other people. We don't want to shine too brightly or have all eyes on us. But I think reading this book, like helped me re-solidify that they're so important. And initiations and births, deaths, they all are rites of passage.
Yeah, I mean, their rites of passage are kind of anchors to the self, right? They help you see your own progress. They help you understand, here's where I've been, here's where I am. I think they're very, very useful psychologically, but you're right. As a culture, and some cultures do this better than kind of mainstream American culture at large, which is a very broad brush. But I think about the different sort of milestones we celebrate and how we celebrate them, and mostly they're terrible. Like you think college or high school graduation, how boring is that ceremony?
So boring.
And it's just, oh God, it goes on forever. And the speeches, and just, it doesn't really serve anyone except for this ideal of what it's supposed to be, but it doesn't actually usually hit everyone in the emotional place or the profoundness of what is happening, right? It's just sort of like, this is a thing we go through. And then when you get married, oh my God, the commercialization of that, you have all the pressure to make sure that you've done this and this and this, and that you have these specific things things and you've spent this much money to do this and this. And if you have a milestone birthday once you're over like 21, it's all like, oh, you're over the hill or closer to death.
Right.
We're not really appreciating, oh, wow, this person's becoming an elder in our community. And there's something very profound and important about that. No, we're just like giving them crap that they're going to die soon. So being able to sit in those moments and appreciate them, I think is a really important thing that not only individuals but communities can do better.
I agree. Yeah, we can do much better with those. And find even the micro celebrations, like, hey, I got a cool new skirt and I think I look good in it, or whatever, whatever your celebration is. Like, and ritual can play into that, celebrating yourself, celebrating your path, marking those milestones. Like, hey, even if it links into things like sobriety, just celebrating that.
Yeah.
And celebrating, oh, hey, I set a goal for myself to journal for 30 days straight and I did it. Celebrate yourself. Like, seriously, like it doesn't have to be huge. And yeah, I like the different rituals you had in this book that really emphasize that, like acknowledging the rite of passage, acknowledging the next step, the milestone.
And this isn't in the book, and it's just a slight tangent, but I found every time I tell this story, people find it really useful, so I'm going to. But sometimes it's hard to celebrate our own wins, and it's easier to celebrate someone else's. So having a buddy to celebrate with can be really useful. And sort of the way that this manifested most importantly for me was when I wrote my first book, Queer Qabalah, I wasn't sure I could do it. I was just like, I don't know if I have the motivation because this was in 2020. It's like lockdown. Everything was a lot. And, big 2025 mood as well. But I thought, how am I going to push through this? So I got a buddy who also wanted to write a book. And every week we each set a goal for ourselves of what we were going to do that week to get our books, like move them forward. Like I'm going to write 2,000 words, or I'm going to do, I'm going to edit this chapter or whatever. And then at the end of the week, we also, at the beginning of the week, we'd set a reward if we accomplished our goal. But neither of us got our rewards unless we both did the thing.
Ooh, I love that.
That's amazing.
Such a great brain hack for people who are like, I'll deny myself a reward, but I won't deny my friend a reward.
Exactly.
So in the same way, having someone who it's like, look, I'm going to celebrate you, you celebrate me might be like a more comfortable way to get through that. If you're just like, I don't want to be a fuss, I don't want to be a bother. Everyone needs an advocate, right? You need someone to be like, hey, this is my friend and they're doing this thing and it's awesome.
You are invited to experience the most famous oracle site in the world with a native Greek priestess who has built a relationship with the Pythia herself. Will you join me? April 27th to May 2nd, I will be leading an intimate group of people on the priestess path to the Oracle of Delphi, the Valley of the Muses, and so much more. Experience shamanic journeying to the beat of my drum as you take in the sounds of cicadas and the scent of sea and olive groves. Eat fresh local produce and wake up every morning to the sea before you, having coffee by the pool in our secluded villa. Be anointed by the Castalia Springs, just like those on the pilgrimages to Delphi thousands and thousands of years ago. Visit seekingnoumena.com/Delphi retreat for more information or to set up a call with me about it. Your intuition is waiting for you to listen. Awaken your gifts with the Oracle. So I have a question that's, I don't know, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I know we said we don't do hard-hitting questions, but this is a big conversation. So I have to ask this one.
Okay.
So in the early 2000s, there was like this big push to strip ourselves of labels. Like, don't have labels. Don't label yourself. Just be you. You're who you are. And that's like that's how I've always kind of approached things. And then in the past, maybe 10 years, 15 years, I feel like it's sort of shifted the other way. It's like, find the label. And like, we see this in the wider witchcraft community, like just a couple days ago, as of recording this, I was in a conversation with one of my containers, and one of the women in there was like agonizing. She's like, I'm a green witch, but I'm also a kitchen witch, but I also love journeying. And so I'm a hedge witch. And I just don't know what kind of witch I am. I said, guys, those labels were only invented by marketing teams like 20 years ago. Like, you don't have to have a label. You could just be a witch. Like, we actually have a term that we used to use, eclectic witch, which is that. It's the everything witch. And of course, these labels are not invented by any marketing teams. But today, there is like a pressure to label. Like, I even remember like my first bisexual experiences, I was reluctant to label them. I was like, oh, girls just love each other. We just really get each other. We're just really close. Like, I didn't label them at all. And that was a habit I didn't even know I had programmed in. And so now this is a personal struggle for me. Like, I very much struggle to call myself part of the queer community because I am married to a cis white dude. And, you know, my queer experiences will never put a target on my back. But my sister-in-law is trans, and her wife, you know, their lives are so deeply affected by politics that I feel really like, as just like a cis white woman married to a dude, I have a lot of struggle sometimes, like wanting to be part of queer spaces, but also recognizing I'm not being oppressed. And I don't want to take away space from the people who are. So then I get wrapped up in, I just get in my head about it.
So a couple things about that. I would actually encourage you to do some research on the marginalization of bisexuality, because I think you'll find there's more oppression than you are conscious of. And in fact, bisexual people not only make up the largest percentage of the queer community, but they also are more likely to be victims of domestic violence. Not that I'm saying this applies to you or anything, but more likely to have mental health struggles, fear domestic violence, things like that, than even folks who are gay or lesbian or whatnot. There's some really fascinating statistics out there that I was unaware of when I sort of started this journey, because I kind of had the same thing about like, well, I'm bi, therefore I'm not oppressed. But actually, it is a remarkably marginalized identity, partly because of that feeling you describe of the, I don't really belong in the queer community, but you also don't really belong in the straight community. And I've definitely experienced being rejected from the queer community because of my relationship status. So like that feeling of having no belonging in either is oppression. That is a piece of oppression that is worth unpacking. So that just taking that piece of that, I just want to encourage a little more deep dive into some of the stats around bisexuality and how it is a marginalized identity that, you are part of the queer community. You get the queer card. It is okay. But also the other piece I wanted to pick up on there, and I'm trying to rewind in my head because I had 2 points and now I'm trying to remember what the other one was. I got so hung up on that one. But labels, right. So Misha Magdalene, I love the book Outside the Charm Circle by Misha Magdalene. If you haven't read it, highly, highly recommend it. It's great about queerness and witchcraft. It was really foundational for everything that I've written. And one of the things Misha talks about in that book is labels as a handle for your cup. The handle of your cup doesn't, it isn't where the water is, but it's what helps get it to your mouth and helps you interact with it in a more comfortable way, right? A label isn't your identity, but it can help you more easily find people of your identity. It can help build community. Of course, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because when people get really, really nitpicky about labels, sometimes they get gatekeepy with those labels. But on the whole, if you're Googling, I feel this way, and it's a whole bunch of vague sort of things, it's a lot harder to find things than I am bisexual. Then it's a lot easier to find stuff, So I think labels are helpful for self-understanding and for community building. And I think some of the efforts to resist labeling are fear of gatekeeping within a community.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm demisexual, for example, does that make me queer enough to be part of this community? Maybe if I just don't label it, then it's okay. All that said, my postscript to that is I generally prefer the label queer just because it allows for a certain amount of fluidity and change as my identity and my understanding of myself shifts. So I'm very much in favor of labels changing over time. I'm in favor of saying, I'm still figuring it out, but I know I'm somewhere in here. I think that's totally okay. So just wanted to kind of like affirm you are part of the community, and also say labels are helpful and they can make it a lot easier. Like I've had people read the glossary of my book and be like, I didn't know that was a thing. I understand something about myself now. And that's great. I love that.
I was going to say your glossary correctly defines bisexual. And for those listening, we get in these conversations quite often. Like, I don't bring it up often, but if I do bring up I'm bisexual, like, I've had people message me and be like, why are you anti-trans? What? Apparently, if you look up definition of bisexual, it means like they tie it to the bi thing, the two genders thing. But for me, I'm a warmer color palette and I love purple. And so the bisexual colors, and of course, pansexual is a little bit newer. So when I was growing up, like bisexual did exist a little bit, kind of. I found it in college. So that flag has like a more personal meaning for me. But I think if I was going to be super specific, I'm probably pan, but this is where I struggle with labels because I feel like I like how you said like queer is the blanket label because it gives that permission for fluidity. Because I never want people, it's like the hedge witch versus green witch thing. I never want people to feel like they can't explore or be curious or expand. Because if we give ourselves, I'm a hedge witch. Oh, but that sea is really inviting, but can't swim in the sea because I'm a hedge witch.
Right.
I don't think people are really doing that, but I think that can happen with the queer community. I've had friends who are like, I think I'm bi, but maybe I'm, I think, some things are clicking. That is how bisexuality, I have definitely seen it oppressed before, is like, if a woman's always been a lesbian, but now she's actually interested in this non-binary person, she's a betrayer of the lesbian community. Like I've seen that one up close and personal one time with a friend of mine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, bisexuality was the only label that sort of described me growing up.
Yeah.
So I'm fairly comfortable with that. I'm also comfortable being called pansexual. The way I describe my sexuality is everyone is hot and I am terrified. like, you know, every gender, like seriously, like that's just kind of the vibe. So I for me, and the way I define bisexuality in the book is like you're attracted to your own gender and other genders. Like
I love
it's
it.
the
That's
bi in
exactly
that
it.
it's like inside and outside. That's a binary there. And I think while I understand the discourse that we want to make sure people are not understanding bisexuality to mean only the cisgenders. And then that sort of resulted in, well, maybe people are misunderstanding it. Let's say pan or poly, is it polysexuals? Another thing where it's like you're attracted to certain genders, but not other genders. And I get that. And then the discourse, I think, got really toxic around the definitions between those two things. And I'm just sort of like, you know what? I'm just queer. I'm bi/pan. There's also the thing about people who don't keep up on the terminology don't know what pansexual means. Much like if I were to go up to someone and say, hey, I'm xenogender, I'm agender, they'd be like, the heck is that? If I say I'm non-binary, they sort of get it now. Yeah. So that's the label I use because it's the most accessible. And that's the other thing with labels. Like your internal labels may be different from your external labels. And that doesn't mean that you are not being authentic. It just understands that not everybody lives and breathes the alphabet soup dictionary that is our community. And like, it's okay to have like, this is sort of a catch-all term that encapsulates it. And if I want to be understood and don't want to give you a long lecture about queer theory, I'm just going to use this term and that's fine.
Yeah. Shout out to Jessica. She is one of our regular listeners. She's in my book club, and she's always like, as a member of the Alphabet Soup community. I just love
it. At the Maryland Renaissance Festival, I got a nice little like leather tag that says Alphabet Mafia, and I wear that whenever I go. Yeah.
Oh, let me ask you about that. My son identifies as bi, and I said that one day. I'm like, the Alphabet Mafia, and he's like, oh, Mom, don't say that. That's insulting. I'm like, seriously, is it now? Like... But you used it, so I'm gonna tell him it's not.
And I'm not the arbiter of what is and isn't offensive by any stretch, but I think it's cute. Like I think it's kind of fun and tongue in cheek.
I do too. I think it's such a clever little, like, not that you're being aggressive towards people. You're not,
right.
You're not mob bosses, but hey, if you wanted to be, I don't know, this day and age, it might be called for.
I hear that and I think like it's the family.
Yes.
Yeah.
The alphabet soup mafia. It's like the family's got
the family.
You come here. Yeah. I'll do a favor for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly how I meant it when I was talking to him about it. And he's like, Mom, don't do that. I'm like, what?
He's such a teenager. We love him.
He's such a teenager.
Well, and it kind of harkens to that coded language we use sometimes in the community when it's like wondering if that person is gay or if they're what. They're like, are they family? Like that's the coded way you talk about it when you're around other like straight people and you're just like talking to your queer friend, like, person over there, are they family? You think they're family? Yeah. So I think it's just a play on that, but I also want to be respectful of, folks who maybe have a different perspective on that phrase. So I'm willing to be educated if I should stop using it.
Okay. Yeah, same here because my son educated me, but I'm not sure it was the right education. So
yeah, that sounds like it's 50-50. It could have definitely just been a teenager.
I think it was just a teenager and him just having a moment that he just felt like, I don't know. He felt like he needed to not say that at the moment.
If you're a serious practitioner teetering on the cusp of progress, it's time to step into true spiritual mastery. This is your invitation to join the Gardens of the Mystic Initiation and Certification Program, where I offer practitioners like you advanced teachings and guided experiences. Sign up now at leandrawitchwood.com or find the link in the show notes to learn more. Embrace your higher calling. Your journey awaits.
Something else I think about a lot when I think of witchcraft and its connection to the queer is it's always been like, it's only at best like since Gardner, really, like that formal modern witchcraft also is pretty much always from Gardner as well. Like when we talk about the way people show up in circle, even the idea of casting a circle, like we tend to take that. It's a watered down most of the time version of Wicca, which is patriarchally founded. But if we reach deeper and deeper and deeper past that, and we think of the ancient priestesses and we think of the cultures that first revered the gods and goddesses that most of us love today, it was endemically queer. My direct ancestors were Maenads in Arcadia. And these were the priestesses of Pan, who would later become Dionysius, and Pan, Dionysius, Apollo, Hermes. These are all extremely queer deities. And I literally, I have a little section highlighted in here where you list some queer deities. I'm like, all my faves. And it was like wholesome to see them all laid out like that. And I was like, man, Greeks are so queer. But modern Greece is like anti-queer. And it's such a awesome, like, not awesome in a good way, awesome in like a powerful way, example of the perversion of what is actually so sacred. It's so sacred. And I think that's what I was trying to get at earlier about like the veil that we're comfortable to peek behind. Like witches, we've got the witches pyramid: to will, to know, to dare, and to keep silent. That to dare, queer people take that so far. Like that, I feel like that's really what that is, and it's beautiful. And that's why it's triggering to people who aren't following that dare. And I also look back at history and I see it's so precedented. Like we live in such unprecedented times in every other way, in millions of ways, I should say. But this is actually one way we have precedence for in our, not necessarily in capital W witchcraft books, but in people who worked with the same energies that we seek to work with today in the past.
Yeah, I'm actually reading a really cool book right now called Queer as Folklore, which just came out like late last year. And it is about the queerness inherent in the roots of various mythical beasts and things like that. Like I'm reading about mermaids right now and how first of all, the sort of mermaids and sirens were two distinct beings that sort of got crossed and merged into one over history. And then also how they are understood in cultures outside of Europe. For example, in Thailand, mermaids are, both part of their culture. And weirdly, they use the term sirena, like siren, like basically straight out of Europe for it. But it's also a pejorative term for gay men. And so there's some really interesting stuff and how that relates to queer culture being sort of in one world and sort of in another. And there's a musician, of course, I don't have the name at the top of my brain, but a musician who has created a song called Sirena that's about being a gay man in Thailand, but being very empowered by that. It's not Thailand, my bad. It's it's another Southeast Asian country. I am misspeaking. I apologize. Because it's Philippines. Sorry. It's in the Philippines.
Oh, I was going to say, this reminds me of bakla in the Philippines. The third gender.
Yeah. So, anyway, it's a fascinating book. I recommend it. It's by, and I'm trying to read the author's name from across the room. I believe it's Sasha Coward.
I actually just pulled it up because I'm probably going to order it right after we get off of here. Yeah, Sasha, Sacha Coward.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a really good book and really well researched. And I love that it expands folklore beyond just Europe. It's like, here's how these mythical beings are across the world.
Yeah, I wrote an article for Laura Tempest Zakrov's New Aradia. She did a whole beautiful with Ron Perron.
Reverend Ron Pedron. He's a friend of mine. I was in that one as well.
Yes, that's right. Because I was like, we were already following each other on Instagram. And I was like, I swear. Yes. So in my piece, that's what I kind of went into, is like how land spirits are non-binary. And so like at the core of it, energy is non-binary. And we can use these land spirits as allies in our resistance. But that's what I was thinking about too, is like we're always looking at Western sources when we think about precedents. And especially in America, we're thinking about we only have 250 years of history here as colonizers to look at, and the two-spirit community, like anything native is going to be subjugated by the modern culture of America. So even though America has precedent in the two-spirit community, we're not going to see that in our mainstream at any point, so it is precedented, actually. Like that's something I've really enjoyed learning as a historian and, dare I say, a queer person, is like recognizing how deeply this goes. Like it feels new and exciting for us because it is, but it is also like we're supported by our ancestors that way.
And it's interesting how tightly woven in gender and sexual oppression are with capitalism and white supremacy. Like those all kind of go together every time historically. And so you're right. That's one of the ways we can rebel against this and decolonize our practice is by having a broader view of gender, and not even just, human gender or animal gender, but gender in like the magical polarity sense, and seeing the divine both and neither with equal weight as the divine masculine, divine feminine, if you use those terms. I struggle with those terms and I have a long rant about polarity in my first book, Queer Qabalah, because I think a lot of that, especially the way Gerald Gardner painted it, it's just a reskin of patriarchy. That's all it is. So I think while there are many, many different types of energy we can work with, not just a binary, and not just even a triplicate, but yeah, too often it's just like, oh, it's the feminine energy of blah. And it's like, well, is it though? Just because it's quiet and receptive, does that make it feminine? Is that what feminine means? There's a whole lot to pick up. There's a whole lot to unpack there. So let's just throw out the whole suitcase.
Well, yeah. I remember just learning like the classic rituals where it's like, as the athame is to the chalice, so the gross, just so gross and so unnecessary.
I'm glad you're not the only one that was like repulsed by that. Like I always kind of
literally like it would feel just squirmy. I don't know. And like there's two kinds of triggered I've learned. Like there's triggered in a, ooh, there's something I need to explore here.
Yeah.
And then there's triggered in the, that's just not for me.
Yeah, I mean, one of the cool things about the Wiccan tradition I'm part of, the Assembly of the Sacred Wheel, which is a syncretic Wiccan tradition based in the Mid-Atlantic, we really do queer that sort of great rite, that Athame chalice thing, because we talk about you can do that with any combination of tools. And in fact, one of our biggest rituals every year, we bring all the Coven tools together in what I call the tool orgy ritual, where the tools all get to hang out and touch each other and share energy. And that's just as powerful as, insert tab A into slot B. The IKEA method of magic, I call it. Yeah.
That's great. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, opening yourself. This is sort of my central thesis to a lot of the stuff I teach about and write about is by opening your mind beyond a binary conceptualization of how magic works, you're going to make your magic more powerful and have a better understanding of the world around you and yourself.
Yeah. 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 There's really no harm that is ever going to come from knowing more information and having more at your disposal to then decide how to move forward.
Acknowledging all the complexity and beautiful diversity within this world and the universe and everything else. Why would you go to an ice cream shop that only has, strawberry and vanilla when you could go to one that has 40 flavors? There's so much out there. And personally, I love the key lime ice cream at my local ice cream shop, key lime, and then they have a graham cracker one that goes really well with it, like key lime pie. So it's like we have all these flavors available, but if you keep going to McDonald's for your ice cream, you're not going to get to enjoy all the variety of stuff we have available to us.
Yeah. Didn't we just have this conversation? Was it you and me, Elyse? Or I can't remember who I was having this conversation with. Oh my gosh. But we were just talking about how if you keep yourself contained in the energy, you'll never know and experience the energy that's out there. So you can't adjust yourself, your mindset, your lifestyle, your prosperity. You can't expand yourself if you're always keeping yourself contained. And I think that's such a great example that, why would you just go to McDonald's for your ice cream when you could go to Baskin Robbins, or you could go to the local ice cream shop and see what they have. Like we have a great local ice cream shop here that has Penn State ice cream. Best ice cream ever, so you can get the crazy flavors that you like.
Yeah. I mean, I love Jenny's ice cream in the grocery store too. Like their blackberry crumble is just some kind of alchemy I can't quite understand. Where how do the bits stay crunchy in here? The oat bits stay crunchy somehow. Anyway,
magic,
magic. Exactly, it's alchemy. But yeah, I mean, that's just one of those things I keep coming back to. Is there's sort of two of the sort of central problems I see in people who are approaching magical thought right now that limit them is that binary view of how everything works. And the other is folks who come into magical practice with the idea that they're going to escape this reality rather than become better at this reality. I think folks who are so hooked on that high from the numinous that their whole life falls apart because they're like, well, none of this is real and I'm just going to transcend. It's like, look, you're here for a reason. We have work to do here, and your spirituality should help make that easier and better and more understandable. Not like this is the thing I escape to because I can't handle what's happening here. So those are kind of like my two biggest pet peeves with how a lot of folks approach their magical practice is like, okay, grounding and centering, lesson 1.
Yes,
shielding, lesson 2.
Sure.
Then we'll talk about what you can do beyond that. And that also came up in Queer Qabalah because a lot of times there's this, you go through the different spheres on the tree of life, and depending on which book you read, it either starts at the top and works to the bottom, or it starts at the bottom and works to the top. So you kind of have to decide which order you're going to do things. And for me, I think it makes the most sense to start with Malkuth, with the sphere that is our embodied reality, and then some, and work your way up to Keter, which is the most like abstract, because you got to plant your roots before you can grow the tree. You have to be comfortable in your embodied self here as you reach up, because otherwise you're going to have not a very healthy tree.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think at its core, explorations into being queer are that embodiment. Like that's it, it is a reminder, like, okay, we have a body, we're here on this planet, we chose that, or are here anyway. So we're here for a reason. So what can we get out of it? And it starts there. And I think that's why queer exploration is so important, and why, no matter your age, no matter your marital status, your uh, no matter the box you think you're in right now, queer exploration is for you.
Yeah.
Still, it's never too late. And I think I'm not even old, and I feel like it's too late sometimes. And I'm like, no, but it's not. Like it's an ever evolving experience.
Yeah. I mean, I encourage everyone to, regardless of how you identify, to take some time to sit and think about, what is my gender and what does that actually mean? Like, if I woke up tomorrow and I didn't have the physical characteristics of my gender anymore, would I still feel like that gender? And if so, what does that feel like? I think that's a question a lot of people don't really sit with. And I'm very lucky. Like, I have a partner who is a cis male who has done that work. And I saw a Tumblr post sort of related that's like, I call him cis plus, because it's like, yes, you are cisgender, but you've also done the internal interrogating and found the answer to that question for yourself. And so, you understand what it's like to interrogate that question. There's a really wonderful book by Meg John Barker and Alex Yantafi called How to Understand Your Gender. And I want that to be required reading for the whole world, because no matter where you're at, it is useful. It is a gentle introduction, and gets you, like, has wonderful journaling prompts and things like that. So yeah, highly recommend that.
I love that. Yeah, my husband and I sat with that because his best friend is non-binary, and they've been best friends since they were kids. And so, like, they've been on this journey of, like, as Rue has been on this journey of, like, who am I as a non-binary person? My husband's, like, kind of been there as well, and, like, experienced, like, being a shoulder, and now his sister-in-law is trans, and, like, now his sister's in a lesbian marriage, and, like, he's very receptive and open to these conversations, and I've asked him several times. I'm like, where are you with that? And we've done journaling together about those things. And that's a good point, that I think I love that queer plus, because I do think there is something to that. Like when we say, like, I'm an ally, well, how can you actually be a better ally? Like, are there ways you can look at yourself that can help you be a better ally by, we always say that in witchcraft, right? Go within to better show up without. This is no different.
Yeah. And it's one of the things I do on my blog, is I like to do ally tips sometimes, and I turn them into zines and hand them out when I go to events. So I have one like, oh crap, you just messed up someone's pronouns. What do you do now? Like,
I like
it happens to the best. I do it. It happens to everybody. But how you respond is the important piece. So a lot of people will make the mistake of over apologizing and making a really big deal of it. And that just makes it like, okay, now I'm comforting you when you're the one who hurt me. And that's just super awkward and weird. So, so I have, like, some really easy do's and don'ts, but another one I have that I think can help folks who are allies and trying to figure out, like, what does it mean to be trans? I have one called Itchy Sweaters. And this is linked right on the front page of my website. But it's a metaphor for, like, I have a lot of friends who are like, you were fine, air quotes, with being called she, her, and your birth name for like 40 years. What the heck changed? Like, why didn't you realize this when you were younger? And to explain it, I'm like, okay, let's look at it this way. Pretend that when you're born, when everybody's born, they are given a sweater by their parents that they put on. They can never take it off. And it's just given to you. And so you don't know what it feels like not to have that sweater on. But let's say the sweater you were given is kind of itchy. And if you're wearing an itchy sweater absolutely every day, all day, every day, you're going to back burner that sensation. Like, you're going to, like, move that to the back of your consciousness because you can't focus on it and also be functional, right? And then let's say one day you get to try on a cashmere sweater and you're like, oh my gosh. I just assumed everyone felt like this. Like I'd assumed this itchy feeling was just what every sweater felt like. But now I realize, there's another way that you can feel. But then you have to put the itchy sweater back on. And then you become really conscious of, oh, wait, oh no, I've been wearing this my whole life. And then maybe once in a while you find places where it's safe to wear that cashmere sweater and you feel awesome, but then you always have to go back to putting the itchy sweater back on, and every time you put it on it's itchier and it's worse. And that's what it's like to realize your gender is not what you always thought it was. And maybe it happens when you're 7 and maybe it happens when you're 40.
Right.
But either way, it's like, and then every time someone misgenders you, they're putting that itchy sweater back on you. And it's just like, gah. So even if you never had that gah reaction to being called she, her, your birth name, your dead name before, now that you know what it's like to feel good, you realize that it did feel bad. You just kind of backburnered it to get through. So that's one of my other sort of ally tip things. And I found that's been really helpful, especially for people who are maybe older than I am, who are really struggling with some of this stuff because they are raised in such a binary society. But yeah, so that's just one of those things. Apparently this is Enfys Goes on Rants, the podcast. So
It's good. No,
oh no, we love it. We love it. We love a good tangent out here.
Yes. Especially when they're good tangents like that. That I love that analogy, the itchy sweater, because you just outlined like the shadow work journey. When you're in a shadow, you don't realize you're in the shadow. You don't realize you're wearing that itchy sweater. And it's not until you take that sweater off that you realize, oh crap, I've been suppressing this my entire life. And the collective shadow is what keeps us in that itchy sweater. And that's perfect. I love that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's finally time. My book, Sacred Wild, An Invitation to Connect with Spirits of the Land, is now available for pre-order. Pre-orders are the #1 key to a book's success. They help Sacred Wild reach more readers and even bestsellers lists. If you love the Magic Kitchen podcast, this is a great way to support my work. Pre-order now at seekingnumina.com/preorder. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, so divine femininity, right? I have been trying to replace those two words, divine masculine, divine feminine. But I don't know how. Like for example, like I'm teaching a course right now called The Red Thread, and I help people. I'm a priestess of Inanna. So as we know, I mean, maybe shout that out too. Gala priestesses are trans priestesses. Like they were assigned men at birth who were trans women. Yep. And they were priestesses of Inanna. So again, ancient precedent. It's there. Inanna herself is often shown with a beard. She's a non-binary goddess. But when I want to describe her energy or the energy of the other goddesses of the Red Thread, like the Morrigan or like Kiveli or like Isis or Hathor or Persephone, like they are divine feminine. They have like... Is that wrong to say that? To call them feminine goddesses? To call them goddesses? To call them she? To call them her?
I don't think it's wrong. I would say interrogate more deeply what they have in common, because the personalities of what you've described are extremely different. Like the Morrigan is not very, like, I don't know if the Morrigan would even be friends with some of those other beings, you know? So I think I'm personally like, okay, yes, we can celebrate the divine feminine as long as we're not perpetuating anti-trans, like turfy sort of viewpoints. And as long as we're interrogating what do we mean when we say feminine. So like that thing I talked about earlier, where if you sit within yourself and you say, if I woke up tomorrow and had none of the sex characteristics of being a woman, what would my understanding of womanhood be? Like, what would make me feel like a woman? And maybe some of the words that emerge from that will be more useful. What I talk about in Queer Qabalah is, especially if you're doing the whole like masculine energy is projective, feminine energy is receptive, why don't we just use the words projective and receptive instead?
Which that's what I was going to say is I think because I'm blessed. My lineage is the eclectic fairy tradition, where I'm the fifth initiate down the line from FERI tradition.
Yep.
So we call it eclectic fairy and we spell it FAERY because we remove the genders from things. We don't have polarity and we work with earth energy and cosmic energy. So I guess if you wanted a polarity, you could call it that.
Sure.
So I never really find myself discussing gender. And in fact, it's only been through the podcast and through the years of study after initiation that I've learned. I did my master's degree in spiritual studies as well, that I learned that there is such endemic, sticky patriarchal things. So I feel blessed that I don't think I have nearly as much deprogramming. And even in this, like, because yes, the Morgan and Inanna, not even close to culturally similar. But what's similar about them to me, which is this is the divine femininity as I define it in this course at least, and there's many ways to define it, but is as empowered rage. And I think of like the things that like women throughout history, we can call them femme presenting as well, but people who have been designated as the gender of woman in their societies have had little control in patriarchy. Yeah. And so these goddesses, I posit, evolved out of they evolved to empower women. Like they come to us to give us that rage, because a woman scorned, right? Like we hear that phrase, but it's true. And I think the reason patriarchy says bullshit, like women are sad, men are angry, and whatever that strange. I read a book by Shekinah Mountain Water called Ariadne's Thread, and that was from like 91 or something like that, 93 maybe. And she like that was the first time I saw it listed like that, like certain emotions are considered male or female, and it really rubbed me the wrong way. And I think that's why patriarchy wants us to categorize things that way. Like you said, the women is receptive, meek, quiet. Like, what? Right. Excuse me? What? To me, the divine feminine. Yeah. To me, it's like our real, like what those goddesses can imbue us with, regardless of our gender, is how to be empowered as a marginalized person, how to use your rage as your voice. And that to me is femininity. The key.
I think that is also marginality might be the broader basket you might want to work with there if you're feeling uncomfortable with the label feminine for this particular kind of course. Look at the marginality. I'd also say, have you read Jailbreaking the Goddess?
I literally have 5 tabs open now for
I know. I'm sorry.
I love this. No,
never not apologize. Just a name; it's a lifestyle. No, Lazara Fox Allen. Same. It may be slightly dated now. I think it came out about 10 years ago, so there's probably some newer terminology that didn't get in there. But it takes to task the threefold goddess concept and breaks it into what if we didn't tie this to fertility or lack thereof, and instead had this 5-fold model of like different sort of phases in life that can happen at any time in your life and different empowerments. That may also be useful for you because it talks about like the creatrix, but it's not just creating another human. It is creating art. It is creating books. It is creating music. And that impulse is all sort of from the same place. And that doesn't limit you by gender either. But then it also talks about sort of the wise one or like the crone sort of thing, but that can happen anytime. We can gain wisdom from people of all ages. So yeah, it's, I think, a really interesting, compelling book that may be.
And what's that book again?
Jailbreaking the Goddess by Lazara Fox Allen.
Oh yeah, I found it. Oh, that's awesome. I'll make a little list of these recommended books actually and put it in the show notes.
Great. Yeah, there's a lot of them. I have I'm always looking at my shelf over here of just like, here's all the queer books. Here's all the witchcraft books. They're all kind of together.
We all love the
books. Here's all the Venn diagram. That's a circle.
Exactly. Pretty much.
Oh, I love that. I hope that listeners get out of this episode exploration, comfort, maybe if they're triggered, I hope it feels like an exciting triggered, like that kind
Or
of like
a curiosity
that's
at least. Yeah, just
that's
Growthful.
curious
Yeah.
about why you're triggered and what
curiosity.
what does that mean to you, and how do you explore that uncomfortableness? That's something I always encourage with all of my students. When you're uncomfortable, explore that. Not judgmentally. We're not going in to judge ourselves. We're going in to explore, why do I feel that way? What message came up throughout my life that was reinforced by the collective around me, by family, by shame. I find shame plays a huge role in that. Like, get curious about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope growthful opportunities is my hope for folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Awesome.
Oh, so tell everybody where they can find you, follow you, get your book, see what's coming up.
Yeah, so my home base on the interwebs is majorarqueerna.com. That's MAJORARQUEERNA.com. Yeah, if you're looking to name something witchy and you like portmanteaus, I highly recommend going to someone in the burlesque community, because that's where that came from.
I love it.
Like, I had a friend who's just like, I will help anyone pick their stage name. And I was like, so this isn't a stage name thing, but so shout out to Danny Cavalier.
Yay.
But yeah, so you can find me there. I have recently gotten rid of my various Meta accounts, so I'm no longer on Facebook or Instagram or anything, but I am on open source platforms. So I am on Mastodon as at Enfys Book at kind.social. And I'm also on PixelFed, which is the new open source alternative to Instagram, at Enfys Book with a capital E. It is unfortunately case sensitive, at pix.lgbt. So Enfys Book at pix.lgbt. So you can follow me there. I also do have a YouTube channel, Major Arqueerna. And I have some upcoming places you can see me IRL if you are interested. I'm doing some stuff for Pride. Pride Month's going to be real busy this year. So June 6th in Tacoma Park, Maryland, I'm going to be at the People's Book doing a signing event. And June 7th, I'm going to be at the Curious Iguana bookstore in Frederick, Maryland. And then June 13th through 15th, I'm super excited. I'm part of an event called Magically Queer, Embracing the Power, Spirit, and Community of Otherness at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, with Matt Oren, Storm Fairy Wolf, Ivo Dominguez Jr., and Allie Kravitz. That's going to be super exciting. And then June 25th, I'm doing a local workshop in Frederick, Maryland about queer rites of passage and magical practice at the Frederick Unitarian Universalist Church. And then August 29th through September 1st, I'm one of the featured presenters at Temple Fest in Charlton, Massachusetts. So it's a busy, busy year.
Yes, it is. Awesome. That's good.
Yeah, I love to hear that. We got to resist. And this is how.
Yep.
Showing up to community, hosting things, showing up to the things that are hosted by others. Yeah, love it.
Yep, absolutely. Remember, you're not alone. We've got a lot of folks working together on this. We just got to find each other and be our most awesome selves.
Merry meet.
Merry part. And merry meet again.
Thank you for joining us on the Magic Kitchen podcast. Please visit my website, leandrawitchwood.com, for news, information, and more episodes.
I'm Elyse Wells, and I can be found at Seeking Numina on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and seekingnumina.com. That's Seeking, Numina.